welcome to the Brent Weinbach podcast. My name is Brent Weinbach, and I'm here with musician, composer, Skipper Wise.
Hey, Brent.
Hey, thanks for being here. I kind of want to just do a little bit of talking just to explain to people how this your appearance here came to be, if that's all right.
Sure.
It started for me in the late 90s. I was working at a radio station and I would go through the jazz section of the station and I try to find records that were between the years 1978 to 1983, and I'd look at the instrumentation on the back of the record or the personnel. And anytime I saw synthesizers on there or names of synthesizers I've never heard of, I always was intrigued by those records. And I came across a record called, it was a self-titled album, and it was just simply Windows. And that was intriguing to me too, that it was just, it said Windows, and I don't know, that just sounded interesting to me. I listened through the album and I liked it, and there was one track in particular that really caught my ear, and it was a piece called Jumpstart. And I played it on my show, and then years later, I was going through some old playlists of mine on the show, and I thought, hey, what about that Jumpstart track, And I did some searching on the internet. This is, many years later. I did some searching on the internet and found it. And I thought, oh, here's this really cool track that I liked, from back then. And so then in 2000, I don't know, maybe 16 or 17, I had the track playing, and I had gone to Dave and Buster's and won this Slinky there. And I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I was playing the track, and then I started just playing with the Slinky that I had won at Dave and Buster's. That was this kind of rainbow Slinky, and I kind of made this sort of dance almost with the Slinky involved, and listening to this track Jumpstart, and I don't know, it kind of became a bit, that it was kind of this. I don't know, this sort of abstract expression of the piece. Anyway, I started doing it on stage as a comedian, and my plan, I thought, well, if I shoot another special, I want to do this bit, and so I thought, well, let me try to find the composer of this, or the creator of this piece of music, and see if I can get permission to use this track if I shoot this special. Anyway, I looked into it, found that the main person behind Windows was somebody named Skipper Wise, and got a hold of you and chatted with you on the phone. And when we were talking, you were telling me some interesting things about the world that you come from, and I thought, well, why don't you? It'd be cool to just ask you a bunch of more questions and have you do it on my podcast. And so here you are. And that's all that talking to lead up to this. That's why you're here. And thank you for being here again. And actually, just to start with, what was your thought when I first contacted you? Did you think, oh, like what? Why is somebody asking about this track from that long ago? I mean, this track is from, I think, 82 or 3 or something like that.
It was recorded probably late 82, released sometime late 83, early 84. In
Yeah.
fact, a quick question. Do you
Oh, yeah.
remember the label the album was on? Was it on ITI or Intima?
No, I don't. So there was
Do you
two different
remember it was
versions.
was a green colored label, or do you remember it was white with little blue types of logo in the center?
I don't remember the
Well,
label,
the
but yeah.
reason I say this is that ITI was a small label run by a gentleman named Michael Dion, who took an interest in what we were doing, and they were distributed through a label called Allegiance Records, which is over in Hollywood, off of the small house the label operated in. It was over on Santa Monica Boulevard in somewhere there near La Brea, something like that, near where A&M Records was. And we got the album out. And in those days, fusion was not exactly a big popular thing, and it was fascinating. You were interested in this stuff.
Yeah.
We could play clubs around town because we were all players. To play that type of music, you had to sort of put an effort into your instrument, and some of the stuff was a little challenging that we wrote. And we could perform it live. And in fact, you were mentioning you were with your girlfriend when you got the Slinky. All I remember is playing the clubs. There were no women to listen to
Oh,
fusion
really?
music. It was all
Oh,
guys.
that's really funny.
Yeah.
Well,
But
I
yeah,
saw a video. Maybe this changed in the later '80s. Maybe more and more people started to get into fusion, and well, what a lot of fusion became is smooth jazz, you
sure.
know. Um, but yeah, I mean, actually, were you getting a lot of flack from jazz purists? I guess back then.
No, it wasn't that. It's just the the things that were working was more the smooth jazz type stuff, but it wasn't called smooth jazz at the time.
Yeah.
There was the Quiet Storm format. I believe it was Lawrence Tanner that had that together, which mixed new age and jazz and stuff together. In fact, in '86, I did a record with the drummer from Windows, Tim Timmermans, called Poems of the Five Mountains, which was on a small label of a keyboard player named Klaus Schultz, who was, I think it was Klaus Schultz, who was in Tangerine Dream.
Hmm.
And I'm going to reference a couple of things. You were looking for keyboards and odd things on the very first Windows record. And the thing that is the first notes that you hear in Jumpstart is a piano called a 360 system. There's a guy, is it Bob Easton? I'm trying to remember names. This is going back a long time now. He developed one of the first digital samples because they were all on chips of an acoustic piano. And that's the first piano you hear. That's not a real, you know, baby grand or anything like that. It was a sample baby grand. And that was really a unique thing for its time.
Hmm.
Uh, we had very little money to record in those days. So the first album was recorded on an 8-track tape
Oh,
recorder.
oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the format in those days. It was still $4 or $5,000 to purchase an 8-track tape recorder with all the noise reduction and stuff. But today we record on our computer, and you have as many tracks as you want, and the samples and all the stuff are so wonderfully put together. You can't tell the difference between an acoustic instrument and half the time and a sampled instrument.
And
But
you're
in
playing
those,
and you're
Mhm.
playing bass on this
I'm
record.
I'm playing bass on this. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's your main instrument, I guess, right?
It was for a long time. When I went in, as my life changed, I played guitar and piano a lot.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And in my generation, if you were doing a session and you could play the piano part and the acoustic guitar part, you got paid 3 times. So,
Yeah.
we all, and for compositional purposes, I usually wrote on guitar. My partner, Ed Cohen, who really authored that tune from Windows, wrote on piano. So I would generally join him on guitar or on bass just to finish compositions and things like that, or start compositions and he would finish.
Now, before Windows, were you playing more traditional jazz stuff? Was it?
No, we were playing in pop bands in the LA Hollywood
Oh,
scene.
okay, so you didn't come from a jazz background, really, or what?
No,
Oh,
no,
interesting.
the music we were playing was a little bit more on the progressive side. It
Yeah.
was pop music, but in those days you could live in Los Angeles and the nicer part of towns for $150 in a one-bedroom apartment. So if you played a gig at the Starwood or the Whiskey or the Troubadour or some of the clubs that were on the Sunset Strip, you could make 35, $40 a night. So you could pay your rent in a week or two and then take lessons with teachers. And through the teachers that I studied with, it enabled me to be able to start moving into the jazzier parts of things. But
Oh,
around town, we were playing more pop music. That's what was required to be able to make a living in the clubs in those days.
oh, wow. And then, so how did you? Why did you start doing jazzier stuff, and how did Windows start, and why did you call it Windows?
Well, okay,
And I kind of have a theory about why it's called Windows, but yeah.
oh, this is interesting though, because what happened was we were um, playing all the clubs. We actually had a lot of interest from labels in those days. for about a 4 or 5 month period. And then our singer, a gentleman named Tommy Funderburk, a really talented singer to this day, was offered the gig to play with Jay Graydon and David Foster with their group called Airplay. And both those artists were very successful in production and as musicians. Jay Graydon played on the Steely Dan records and many
Hmm.
other albums. And of course, going from there for Tommy to be able to get into a band with him and David Foster, who became a very successful producer, as everybody knows. He left what we were doing, and we were without a singer and sort of heartbroken. And especially since we had interest and worked really hard for a couple of years playing all the clubs around town. So Ed's father gave him a little money. We went into a studio in Hollywood and recorded 4 demo songs of this fusion stuff that Ed had put together that I helped him finish composing. And he sent out, in those days, you'd send out demos on cassettes. So he sent the 4 songs out to about 25 different labels and got 24 no's. But one
Uh-huh.
letter came back, yay. And that was from Michael Dion at ITI. When the album was done, we were initially called Clockwork, not Windows.
Uh-huh.
And the label did a search and discovered there was a band somewhere called Clockwork. They didn't have a record out, but they had registered the name and they didn't want to relinquish it. So Windows was just a quick sit at the table, figure out a name type thing with a record label that they would accept. And when the name came up, I looked at everybody and said, "Is it Microsoft going to get upset?" And they said, "It's not in the jazz music area. I think we're going to be okay." And
I
it stuck.
yeah, well that's wait, was there did they have Windows in 82 even? I mean,
Um,
I guess if you thought that, there
I
must have
don't
been.
know.
I mean,
Maybe not. I thought I remember that came up at one point. So maybe it was later on. But
yeah, maybe later on you guys thought, wait a second, we're gonna get confused here. Yeah. And by the way, that makes the band hard. It was hard at first when I was trying to find, you or who was behind this band. That did come up at first. Was oh, it might be hard to find this band, but I think eventually I did find something, Discogs or something like that. Found some
mhm.
information to help me lead me to you. I thought it was maybe called Windows because maybe each piece of music is kind of a peek into a world or something like that, a window into a scene or something like that. That was kind of
Well,
how I
the
interpreted.
artist that Tim was working with that painted the first 2 covers, that and Is It Safe, the second record, which were the
Yeah.
heavy fusion records out of the whole catalog of 10
Yeah.
albums or 11 albums. Um, the artist sort of had that view, and that's why you see, the first cover's got these windows kind of looking, in the background.
Yeah. But you just thought, how did you, you thought the name up, right? I mean, and you were trying to change it from Clockwork, but it was just, why did
I
that come to
think
mind?
I think Ed came up with the name.
He did. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
I can't remember. We were all sitting around, kind of upset that we couldn't use Clockwork
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because that's what
Well,
we wanted to use.
actually, why did you want to call it Clockwork?
We had a song called Clockwork
Ah, okay. Okay.
on the album,
Okay. Got it. Okay.
which was really everybody's favorite song on the
So
album.
it would have been the album would have been called Clockwork. The band was Clockwork, and the song was Clockwork. Everything Clockwork.
It was Clockwork.
Yeah. And so okay, so you do these fusion albums, the two of them. And by the
Mhm.
way, I guess the artwork was the same on both labels. I guess it was two labels that did the record, put out the record at one point, and it
Well,
was
yeah,
the
what
same.
happened is after the second record did not sell very well at all. It was really our best work at writing fusion stuff, but it was so far into that genre, it didn't resonate with radio or retail. You couldn't sell records in the stores because you couldn't get on radio with that kind of stuff.
Well, was
Um,
that first album was that how was that received, and did that get radio play, or how did?
yeah, the first album was a little more accessible, and there was a station out here in LA called KKGO at the time.
Hmm.
And they were playing Morning at Salt Point, and they were playing a lot of stuff off that album. They were playing Manque de Bourgeois, kind of a ballad tune, and they did play Jumpstart,
Mm.
and they played one other tune, Penelope.
Okay.
And so those four songs were getting airplay, and it was enough for the label to offer us these to pick up the option for the second advance so we could do the second record.
And did
And
you now? And you said you didn't get any. I mean, because there is that thing of some jazz fans. They look at fusion and they think it's kind of a bastardization of jazz, and but you never experience any kind of criticism from anybody about that
no, because
sort of
live
stuff.
it was exciting. It was loud. I mean,
Yeah.
we just had a lot of experience in playing live, with the stuff prior to that from all the club circuits. So when we got on stage, we didn't sort of think about it wasn't like playing the small jazz clubs like Dante's out here in North Hollywood or any of the smaller kind of quieter clubs. We were playing places like at my place. We played the Corral in Topanga Canyon before it burned down. We were playing clubs where you could blast, and we did.
Uh-huh.
It was a when we the first album we toured with Dudley Brooks, wonderful guitar player who's since passed on. But Dudley and I went to school together. I knew him from junior high actually,
Oh wow.
and Dudley was a great guitar player. And then Daryl Caracco, who came into the group at the end of the second album and played on a couple of tracks. Dudley's on most of the second album, but we toured with Daryl, and Daryl and I had a lot of experience playing more louder type of pop stuff. And so there was between all of us, we were just very aggressive, and it was exciting live, but it didn't translate to radio.
Did you were you did you start to become a part of a sort of jazz fusion community? I mean, did you start to get to know other jazz fusion artists?
Um, yes and no. I mean, one night at my place, one of the more difficult moments of my career performing with Windows, it was not very full. It was a half house. Half the place was full, and I'm about to do a bass solo, and the song we were playing was a song called "Is It Safe," which is the title of the second album, and I'm looking around in the audience, and there's Stanley Clark.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I went, oh gosh. And I wouldn't say it was one of my better bass solos. I was petrified, but
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, I was able to go up and say hi. But I started meeting all those people right around the third record because the wave format was starting, the whole smooth jazz format was starting, and
And
all
you
of this,
basically
yeah.
transitioned it more. The band became more smooth jazz oriented than at that point. Right?
Well, this is an interesting story. On the second record, which was a pretty heavy fusion record and is my favorite record of all the Windows records, that was the least, so, the worst selling of all the whole catalog. There's a song on there that I wrote for a friend's wedding. It's called The First Dance. And that track was kind of a mellow tune, and it started getting airplay. It started getting airplay on the Quiet Storm format. And this is an odd story because when I was 13 years of age, living in LA, I won a contest on a radio station called KKDJ. It's 102.7 where Kiss FM is today.
Kiss FM, yeah.
And I went to the station by winning this contest by identifying the song on the radio, which was Baby I'ma Want You by the group Bread. I'll never forget it. And I went to the station and I met a DJ there named Jeff Salgo who put on the contest and stuff. And I worked as a gopher, filing records, learning how to edit tape, stuff like that during that summer as a young guy at 14 years of age.
Wait,
And
what was the prize that you got?
to come to the station and get a tour, and then I asked for a summer job, and they offered it to me.
Okay, interesting. That was the prizes. You get a tour. They didn't give you free tickets to a show or something like that, or
Nothing like
okay,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
Instead, they gave you a
Um,
job. Okay,
and I
or
gave it, yeah. My mother dropped me off at Sunset and Vine, and I walked up to the 16th floor.
mhm.
But from there, during that summer, the music director at KKDJ was a woman named Christine Brody. And Christine, if you hear this, I'd love to say hi to you. It's been years. So when they were putting the wave format together for Los Angeles. It was to go into a frequency called 94.7, which was where KMET was, which was
Mhm.
a very popular station for guys who are listening to AOR album oriented radio, in LA. There was KLOS and KMET. Their job was to put on this new smooth jazz format.
Mhm.
There wasn't a lot of material around at the time. You
And
had Chuck Mangione, you had, a lot of, even Weather Report, even though as fusion oriented as they were, they did have some softer stuff that you could play. So
mhm.
they were looking for a pref of this to be able to program because there were no DJs and we're just going to run this 24/7 and repeat, songs after 24 hours, that kind of a thing.
And by the way, just for reference to people listening, that the Wave, it was the in my time was the premier, well, the only smooth jazz station on on the radio. 94.7 the Wave. Uh, yeah. Anyway, it was, and it's now no longer is that the format on the Wave, and there is no smooth jazz on the radio anymore. But in the
This is
in the
1980, 86,
yeah,
85, 86. Yeah.
and but anyway, it's a famous station that famously played smooth jazz, and so anyway,
And by the
we
way, there
get
were 35 of them. It wasn't just one station. So Christine was working with a gentleman named Frank Cody, and he was the program director. She was the music director. And they were planning how to take KMET off the air and put this format on. And she was looking for music and saw my face and my name. She says, "Could this be the same kid that worked,
no kidding. Oh, really?
and called, got a hold of me through the label. And when she called, I was so first of all, I was happy to hear her and hear her voice. But then she said, "Why don't you come on down? I'd like to talk to you about a few things." And we said, "Sure." So I went down to KMET, which was in the Miracle Mile area near Fairfax and Wilshire in LA. And the job was they needed jingles. They had somebody who was doing the vocal jingles out of San Diego, and they said, "We need some instrumental jingles." And if you remember the melody, it went 94/7, the wave.
Hmm.
And I think they still play it to this day. I haven't listened to the
Oh, do
station
they
in a
still use it even though it's not
like,
even
yeah,
like
it's
that
not
anymore?
it's not the ones who, but we did the instrumental versions of those.
Yeah.
And this is the kicker, and you have to understand your audience, but if to record an album, usually you put out an album a year in those days, when the Beatles were doing it, or the guys in the 60s and the early 70s, singer songwriter guys, they were putting out two albums a year, every 6 months. It's amazing if you think of some of these artists, the amount of stuff they wrote so quickly. But the production values were a little bit easier to deal with because you recorded everything live and all that. As we got more into the fusion stuff and the higher end recordings and the audiophile recordings, people took their time with the recording process, and it really turned into an album a year. So she says to us, "We need 150 songs for the wave format that we're going to play every 15 minutes on the hour. And every song has to fade at 3 minutes and 21 seconds.
Hmm.
And we need to get this done in about 6 to 7 months." And my partner Ed, who's with me, steps on my foot, and I step on his foot. And I go, "Be quiet, don't say anything," because if we tell him that it took us a year to record the 10 songs, that you found this one song, First Dance, off our second record that you like, if you need 150 of those out of us, it could take a long time. But I didn't say anything. And they offered us a nice chunk of change, to put it mildly. It
Okay.
was 5 times than what we were getting to make a record.
Yeah.
And I just said, "We can do that," not
Uh-huh.
knowing if we could. And we wound up working together for about almost 2 months writing these 150 tracks. And we came up with a format how to do it. And it sort of worked because we had charts for all these songs. And then we hired a group of musicians from our circle. We went into Chick Corea's room. Now, you like fusion. So Chick
Sure.
Corea had a recording facility in Silver Lake called Mad Hatter.
Okay.
Beautiful room with a Bosendorfer piano that he used on a lot of the Return to Forever records.
Hmm.
Another fusion, great fusion band. My
Yeah, of
favorite, one of
course.
my favorites of all time. And we would line up, we pull out the chart. Each chart had the name of a song that we could reference. of what the beat would be like or the rhythm. If it was Stand By Me or something, we know it'd go bump, bump, the bump. So that's the rhythm. Then they'd look at the chart and the melodies would be there, and sax player would interpret the melodies, and we would record this stuff live to a 2-track tape recorder. No multi-track stuff, just live to 2-track. And Tom McCauley, who is an engineer, has worked on so many of our albums and has done so many records of the jazz area and all. Everybody from the Manhattan Transfer to the great bass player Brian Barnberg to so and so and so and so. He was the engineer that recorded this stuff, and we finished it. And these songs went every 15 minutes on the hour on the wave. And I'm sorry,
These
you were
songs
gonna.
were the now these were not were these songs were not they weren't the based on the melody that was the wave
No, we
thing.
did the
These are just
jingles first. We did the jingles. They loved what we had done.
how many of the
And
jingles did you do?
oh gosh, I have the tapes in the garage still to this day. There's probably about 25 or 30 of them.
So when I okay, so if you grew up in Los Angeles or the area, or I guess maybe they use these in the stations in other markets too. But when you heard that those instrumental versions of the wave, I guess station ID or whatever, da 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 da, da those were at this time at least in the '80s were those were yours or you had recorded those.
Yeah, we recorded. We didn't write the melody. Frank
Right, right,
whistled the
right,
melody.
right.
And I believe, gosh, this is a while ago, but I think here I am sitting in the station when KMET is going off the air. They're counting this down, one, two, three, whatever they did. And the first thing they played was one of these jingles. And for the first year or two, I can't remember if it was a year or 2 years, they didn't have DJs.
Oh, okay.
They
Huh.
just so they just ran the music, and
Yeah.
so a lot of people didn't know what they were hearing.
Mm.
So at the 15-minute marks, you'd hear a song from us that would fade at 3 minutes and 21
Yeah.
seconds.
Well, okay. So just about the jingle thing, though, did you you were telling me this on the phone that you just were someone just hummed it to you the melody, and then you guys went off of that, or did you have
Yeah, it was whistled to us or
it was
something like
whistled to
that.
you? And yeah,
Yeah, by the
but they
program
did
director.
actually have some vocal versions of that
Right.
before
We
prior to
never
that,
did any of the vocal stuff. We only did the
right?
instrumental versions of it.
So okay, and then these 150 songs that you guys produced, did they? Those weren't for an album or anything. They was just purely for the station to play.
Yeah, that
That's
they were.
interesting. So it was just you were hired to create content for the station that didn't even get released on a record.
Yes.
That's
and
interesting.
and
That's really
and well,
interesting. I didn't even know that ever worked like that. That stations. I mean, was that a common thing for stations to do that? I
I
mean,
have never in all my career within music up till 99, 2000, when I went over to Blue Microphones and did that. I never ran into anybody, anything like it. And there were 35 stations that were run by a thing called the Satellite Music Network. And now, mind you, I could be getting some of this wrong, but this is my recollection of it. I think there was a guy named Robert Hall that was involved. And all the 35 stations at the time were playing all this material that
and
we
these
had
these
written.
stations are just stations that are around the country or something.
Right. There
Uh-huh,
were
uh-huh,
wave stations all over the US.
uh-huh.
And
I didn't even know there was that the wave existed outside of Los Angeles, but yeah.
yeah, now they owned during that time, they owned the recordings,
I'm
so
sorry,
we could.
were they called the wave or they were called something else, but it was basically the same station?
They were all called the Wave.
They're all called the wave. Okay, yeah.
It was a format that was sold to these stations. This is popular. You do this, your advertising dollars will go up in value.
What happened to all this music? Did they have it in a vault somewhere now, or do you
Well,
have copies of it?
what happened was after about 24 months, we got a call and said, you know what, we're getting a lot of requests for certain songs that you've recorded. And we had already moved labels over to Intima, which was part of the Enigma music group that was distributed by Capitol. And we did an album called Mr. Bongo.
Oh yeah.
And right around, we had finished Mr. Bongo, but what happened right after that, we started getting information about this requested top 20 of these 150 tracks. And so these songs people really seem to like. I said,
Huh.
do you mind if we re-record 10 of these
Oh.
in a multi-track form, a more embellished, and they said, no, sure, go ahead.
Hmm.
So we took the 10 most popular tracks, or the tracks that we liked that were conducive to the way we played at the time. And that's when the change of the band came from doing fusion, because bongo was a little bit of a crossover. We were starting to get a little bit more smoother, but it was still fusion.
Yeah.
And we recorded these 10 songs. And at that point, Enigma dropped the whole fusion thing or the jazz thing that we were on Intimo, or they went out of business. I can't remember, but we wound up with a new deal on a label called Cypress Records, which was distributed by A&M. And they had had a hit with an album called Famous Blue Raincoat by Jennifer Warnes, which was a bunch of Leonard Cohen songs from what I remember.
Hmm.
And they made a fairly decent offer to us, which included a solo record for me doing vocal work, which is another story.
Art,
But
just out of curiosity, but real quick, did you on the song "Mr. Bongo"? Isn't that you singing on that too? Or
no, that's
no?
Richard Morris. It's one of
Okay.
the a
Yeah.
friend of ours.
Okay.
I didn't sing on any Windows record until this record we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
So this record, they loved the music. They understood why we recorded it and found that fascinating and thought that could be really helpful because at this point now, the wave format is in full swing and it's
Hmm.
popular.
Quick question
Um,
also about that. Well, maybe this is not a quick question, but why do you think smooth jazz became popular? I mean, what? Obviously, they started the station and they or this format at least, and they obviously wanted more of it. And what do you think resonated with people? Why were people wanting to hear smooth jazz? What
it was
shifted?
basically it was first off as a if the songs were there, it had that R&B-ish kind of, easygoing thing, almost like a Marvin Gaye, thing,
Hmm.
and it was easy to digest,
Okay.
and it was good for a generation. A lot of my generation, or the boomers,
Hmm.
at that point we're everybody's now in their 30s or late 20s and 30s, and things are changing, and it became more of a palate, a taste, for the time. And
Do you think maybe it was also maybe people wanted to mellow out a little bit from the '70s or something? Or
I don't know the reason, but I can tell you this. When it started to work, it's like a snowball. If you start down the mountain with one revolution, it doesn't pick up much snow, but the bigger it gets, every revolution, it gets that much bigger. And that's what started happening because now all of a sudden, the way records were sold in those days. You have to remember, you walk into a Tower Records or a Warehouse Records or a Music Plus, the names of the record stores in those days. The jazz and the fine arts and the classical and the bluegrass, all that stuff was in the back of the store because it was only 4% of the retail pie. 96% of it was pop music. And that was where the records were up in the front. So what happened was radio the way the retailers bought is they'd look at the radio charts, and there was Cashbox, and there was the Gavin report, there was the Mac report, in Radio and Records, which was the biggest radio reporting thing. They would show what the radio stations are playing, and the radio stations now had format. They had contemporary hit radio, CHR. You have R&B for R&B music, and now we had one called NAC, which stood for New Adult Contemporary. That's what they called smooth jazz.
yeah.
So all of a sudden, there's a top 30 now of the songs they're playing. Well, when this album that we were working on came out, which became known as The French Laundry, that was the name of the album,
Right.
it because it was already people, and at that point they started having DJs on the wave in LA, which prompted everybody else to have DJs. So all of a sudden they started back announcing the record. That's Windows from the French Laundry album. That's a song called Spin of the Wheel. This song called Night Whispers. Here's the title track from the French Laundry, sung by Skipper Wise, me, and a guy named Al Stewart. And if anybody remembers Al Stewart, he's a wonderful recording artist. He wrote great songs like You're the Cat, Time Passages with our good friend Peter White, who was part of helping Windows out. Peter is a very successful smooth jazz artist and a very close friend of mine. I consider him my mentor and older brother. Um, so as this stuff started getting charting on the radio charts, retail would say, "Let's buy that record and put it in the store." And because of these charts now in existence, which was not there a year prior or 2 years prior, they would move the records out of the 4% in the back and bring them up front. Now all of a sudden we're starting to sell records. The snowball's getting bigger. Now all of a sudden you can play concerts because people are buying your record and hearing it on the radio, and they show up to see you.
And women are coming too now.
That's right. The guy could say, "Hey, honey, you want to come along with me?" And they
Right,
would say
right, right.
yes. Whereas that, I'm not going to go listen to that fusion stuff.
It's just interesting. That's interesting to me that this became more now appealing to more people. I mean, what do you think? Why do you think women liked smooth jazz more than and didn't like fusion? I mean, is fusion just too like what you know? What I mean, what's behind all that?
I mean, this is just a simple way of breaking it down. I think fusion is a little bit more cerebral. There's a lot going on. You got to really pay attention, and there's not a lot of repetition.
Hmm.
There's something happening unique a lot. And when people are soloing, it's quick. You got to really just focus. And sometimes you have to an aptitude for it. It's nice if you listen to the record and then come hear it live. It's easier to understand what's happening. For a first time hearing stuff live, that's fusion and going by quickly, and sometimes sound isn't the greatest in these clubs. It's hard to take it all in. Whereas
So,
if you're is with the smooth jazz stuff, we were still a louder band. Windows was still, even French Laundry where we played, we still included some of the fusion stuff in the shows.
mhm.
But they were there, so we had a larger audience to play it to and kind of coerced them and go buy earlier records. You
Yeah.
see where we came from. But think about it. Smooth jazz is something. It's a sexier sound.
It's
If it's
sexy, I
like,
guess. It's sexier,
yeah,
and it. I guess it is fusing more pop with it rather than progressive rock or whatever. I guess.
that's correct. And in
Yeah,
fact, remember I mentioned to you we had references to all the songs when we wrote the 150 tracks.
yeah,
We were referencing pop stuff.
yeah.
Pop was what we were using.
Okay, and then so, did you at all feel when you were doing these shows now, and you're playing a lot of smooth jazz tracks? Were you feeling like were you feeling passionate about that, or did you feel like you were losing something that you felt more strongly about that maybe I don't know. I'm just wondering if you liked the louder fusion stuff more and felt like you were sacrificing anything by doing more smooth jazz stuff.
No, the bottom line is we wanted to be good at what we were doing. The French Laundry record went number one and was up there for a while on the charts. We were very proud of that. And in fact, it was a period of time for about 5 years. We had a lot of success. And in order to be good at something, you got to really work hard. So we put our heart and soul into it. And that doesn't always necessarily mean you're going to be successful.
Hmm.
I mean, I know so many talented people that just weren't there at the right time, right place, or didn't get the opportunity. It's no different in professional sports. There's a lot of guys in the minor leagues that could play on the big stage, but they don't get the opportunity.
Yeah.
So we were thankful and we were passionate about doing a good job, and it made the performance aspects a very proud moment for all of us. In the musicianship and the people I worked with, because I wasn't up there by myself, even though I wrote most of this stuff. It was performed by an incredible group of guys who could improvise. Because even with the smooth jazz stuff, in the center, there's just room to space and to play and let it out. It's not written. It's what are you feeling? And the talent that we were working with allowed that to be experienced by an audience, when they were playing out on that level.
At this point, this is French Laundry comes out in '89. Is that right?
89, yeah. It
Yeah.
was recorded in 88, and
Okay, and
it came
then
out in 89.
at this point, you start doing more shows and touring, maybe more. Are
Yeah.
you now starting to meet more smooth jazz groups and smooth jazz artists and be
Well,
friendly with them and stuff? Or
yes. Well, it's funny you should say this, but I do want to mention one thing because you mentioned we were talking about fusion groups. I met Weather Report playing the Gavin convention in
oh,
San Francisco.
oh,
Gavin was a magazine that reported for radio
hmm.
stuff and all about smooth jazz and stuff. But I had a recording facility and I built it. I mean, for all the monies that we got for the record, I threw it in equipment. So did Ed, and I wound up eventually buying him out of the studio. But it was first at his folks' house, and that's where we recorded the first three Windows, actually first four Windows records. We did some of the stuff at Chick Corea's room for French
Yeah.
Laundry, and half of it was recorded in our little room over in Ed's folks' parents' house in the garage.
By the way, did you
Uh,
know Chick Corea?
No, I
Oh,
just met him when he came into the studio and said hi,
uh-huh.
and he was
Oh,
asking what we were doing. He was fascinated with it
oh,
because he
nice.
knew that we were sort of at the center of the storm of this stuff,
Yeah.
um, because of the jingles and the fact the record was, the bongo record actually went to number three on the charts.
Hmm.
The charts had just started that year, and the label Intima. I remember getting a phone call from them explaining, "We're so sorry, we're the label's going out of business and we can't support your record." And they were really nice about it, but it led us to the new album deal. So after when French Laundry came out and did well, and I did go back into Mad Hatter a couple times for some other work I did. Chick came out and was always very, very polite and very nice.
By the way, there's a song, and I think you sing on it. It's the about the rain, the one that
Yeah,
what's
well,
that?
I'll explain that. And
Yeah. What's
that's
that
called
one again?
standing up. It's called
I
standing outside in the rain.
Yeah,
But
standing outside in the rain. I that song's familiar to me. I must have been hearing that on the radio or something.
you were. I was the
Yeah.
first vocal. I think I was probably the first vocalist they played on the wave
Okay. Yeah. By the
because I was
way,
plugged
yeah,
in and they liked the song. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Wait, what year was that one?
that was 89. I had
That was
done a
89. Okay.
solo record and Peter White produced that record.
Yeah.
And by the way, him producing that record, we had a deal that if he would do my record, Peter was working with Al Stewart. I don't know if you remember who Al was.
Mm-mm.
Um, and and Peter had written a song with Al called Time Passed. It was a big hit. And he was touring with Al. He played all the Spanish guitar playing on those albums, like On the Border. Absolutely amazing musician and great piano player too. Peter did my record. We had written Standing Outside in the Rain. We were thinking maybe it was going to be a demo for Al Stewart, and I wound up writing the lyrics and singing it.
Oh,
And it was just one of those things where you sort of know, oh my gosh, the song came out well. And I played it for the guys at the Wave, for Chris Brody and Frank, and they okayed it. And because the Wave wasn't playing any vocal music at the time.
they weren't playing any Michael Frank stuff at this time.
I don't believe so. I think that
Uh-huh.
was afterwards.
Okay. Huh.
But when they started playing vocal, Michael Franks was that big artist they played. The
Well,
Art of
sure. I
Tea
mean,
album, yeah.
I feel like some of your. I mean, your vocal stuff sounds kind. I mean, it sounds in the same vein as Michael Frank's, definitely.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, I always consider Michael much better than what I was doing. But
Oh.
we at the time you didn't want to, you weren't going to scream out, on a smooth jazz station. So the
Hmm.
approach was to keep low. And it's sort of how I got my style.
Uh huh.
It sort of helped me out a bit. Um, and after that, I started singing on the Windows records. The subsequent record, Blue September, I sang a track. Janice Ian sang a track. Al Stewart sang a track. And I started doing vocal stuff
Did you
going
ever?
forward.
Did you ever? So did you ever end up becoming chummy with Spyro Gyra or some of these big? smooth jazz bands? They started as fusion too.
Well, so I guess the story I left out, I had a
Bob
studio
James.
now. I
Oh
had a
yeah. So
studio now
right.
in my
Okay.
place, right? So everybody's coming in. Peter White came in, Richard Elliott. I don't know if you know who Richard is, this
Mm,
great sax player. Richard played some of the Windows stuff, and
okay.
he used my studio. There was who else was in there? Brian Bromberg, great bass player. Um, Peter White, of course, was in there doing his stuff. Um, I'm sorry, I can't think of all the names of the artists, but there were Manhattan Transfer was in there
Oh yeah.
recording. So a lot of the people were on the wave were coming in to use the room. And one of the things I left out there when we were doing the jingles back in '86, we were also showing up I think it was once or twice a week. We were recording a thing called Lady Sings the News, where Cheryl Benteen of the Manhattan Transfer would come in and sing the news. And the news was written out by Bruce Valanche, the great writer.
Uh huh.
And that those were the kind of silly things we were doing. And
Yeah.
that's how, so the Manhattan Transfer was aware of our recording facility, and they were using the room.
Uh huh.
So
Um.
when you play live, you usually get picked up. Usually you're with other bands and stuff. David Benoit.
Yeah.
In fact, the last window show I did with David Benoit and hung out with him after the show.
When was that?
That was probably 90 in the mid 90s somewhere.
Hmm.
We played the Flagstaff Jazz Festival. I remember.
Hmm.
So I knew it was the last window show for a while. The band that I had at that point was breaking up because people had other things going on in their lives. And I sat with David and hung out afterwards, had dinner, and partook in whatever libation he had with him at the time.
Uh-huh. Well, it's. I mean, we're. I'm thinking we should move to the extended portion of the show and maybe wrap up this portion. We didn't even get to, but we can get into it in the extended portion of the show. We didn't even get into you dealing with, you ended up getting involved with hardware, or
Yeah.
and and um and there's probably more about where smooth jazz eventually went, and then I guess how you played into, what your role in that was or whatever, and stuff.
Well, it played. I mean, I guess I'm going into a lot of details, but what happened is, like in any format, it ran its course.
Hmm.
And what generally happens is the group, the musicians get older and we begin to age out. And there's a new group of people coming in doing different things and creating a different format. We were all rode this for about a decade,
Hmm.
and it came to a point in my life where we weren't going to be selling many records, especially as our audience was aging out too in some ways, and they would rather go see live shows. So you had to go start performing. And a lot of the acts that I know have been performing, 100 days a year, 125, 100, who the heck knows, 150. They're just
Hmm.
out all the time. Peter is out every 2 weeks, I believe, on the road still at his age.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of work. And I was raising a family,
Yeah.
and I decided I would take a break because I didn't want to tour all that much. And we had started a company called Blue Microphones, which was a story in itself, but became quite successful. I worked through with Apple with the design of a microphone called the Snowball,
Yeah.
which I'm showing you a quick picture of. Back, we used to do very high-end recording mics because that's what we knew, like these kind of things that you saw in the recording facilities. These
Hmm.
were expensive microphones. But then when Apple came calling for the USB stuff, we eventually developed this, which everybody seems to know because it became
Hmm.
the best-selling USB microphone in the world, which is called the Yeti.
Yeah.
And we rode that for a long time, and I stopped recording because this was a full-time thing that I was running and designing products with my partner Martins. And when we sold it, I went to Gibson Guitar, designed and put together their mic division. And uh, make a long story short, we wound up buying it back, selling it to a company called Turtle Beach out here. And I recently retired from all of that stuff about 3 years ago, and I'm recording again. I
Okay.
always I always recorded and played music. but now I'm doing new stuff, and there will be a new Windows record that we'll be
Oh,
recording
really?
at some point. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so look, I want to wrap up this main episode, and where would you like people to find your stuff? And when it comes out, the new Windows record is the best thing to go check out your website.
No, I'm just Spotify, Apple
Okay,
iTunes,
so looking for Windows. I
Amazon
mean,
Music. Yeah.
I guess people have to say Windows Band, or how do they
You have
what?
to, I guess you're right, Windows Jazz, or
Yeah,
just search,
Windows.
you could search under Mr. Bongo, The French Laundry,
Uh
Is
huh.
It Safe, any of the album titles, and it
Yeah,
should take you to a page of all the music.
and
Or put
also
my name in there and it
yeah.
comes up. Yeah.
Well, if you go to skipperwise.com, it's skipperwise.com, right? You have a
Hmm.
lot of your music up on your site, and I don't know, it's an easy place to find a lot of
Actually, you want to
your
stream it
work.
for nothing, just go up there and there's a whole
Oh,
music
but it's probably
player.
better if people stream it on, Spotify or whatever.
It's a
Okay,
better
well,
experience. You're going to get better fidelity.
go to Spotify and do it. But uh, look, thank you so much for talking to me about smooth jazz and your part in it and everything. If you want to carry on with us, and we're going to talk maybe more about the microphone stuff you did, and we're going to also, I thought it'd be cool to maybe listen to Jumpstart, and maybe you could kind of walk us through it and stuff.
Sure.
And if you want to do that and carry on with us, go to patreon.com/poundcast, POUNDCAST. And you also, obviously get access to all the other extended versions of the episodes there, and all the old Poundcast stuff as well. And also, you get the episodes a couple days early as well. So if you want to watch this episode on video, you can go to youtube.com/at Brent Weinbach podcast. If you want to see what the snowball looks like, do that. And thank you to Jack Birch for his help behind the scenes. And I think that's about it. Thanks for listening. This is the Brent Weinbach podcast. Thank you again to Skipper Wise. I'm Brent Weinbach. We'll see you next week. And if not, we'll just see you in a little bit in the extended portion of the episode. Okay, bye bye.